Hi everyone, Arun Santosh. I'm a principal solution architect specializing in QuickSight. Been with the product for 4.5+ years, overall 20+ years of industry experience, mostly in the BI space. So let's get started. In today's session, quickly go over the agenda. I just have this one agenda slide and it's all going to be demos and hands-on walkthrough beyond this. So we'll quickly talk about what generative Q&A modes of embedding are available, specifically focusing on Q in Amazon QuickSight. So earlier, if you have worked with the prior version or the legacy or classic version of Q, you know that you could embed the Q search bar. And now we are retaining that experience. We do not want to cause major disruption for folks who are already using Q search bar within their applications. So we have an equivalent experience. And we are also giving a full screen experience. And I'll show you both of these in a moment. Then we will get into exploring the embedding options as you're embedding this queue, either in full screen mode or in search bar mode. What all tweaks can you make to that experience? What all features can you turn on and off? We will see that live. And we'll also look at the messages that Q emits. There is a slight change or slight enhancement in the messages that's being emitted. And then we'll talk about how you could go about upgrading your existing Q embedding implementation over to use the generative version. Okay, so with that, let's dive straight in. I will take over the screen share from you at this point, Maddie, and share my screen. Okay, so I am on our DemoCentral site, and this is a public-facing site. Maddie, if you can kindly drop that link in chat, folks who want to try this can go on and try from there as well. So in here, under the Ask You section, we have the generative Q&A, and this is the new experience. So people who have used Q in the past and embedded the older version of Q, you would notice that this looks very much similar to that experience. It's taking up only a small space up front and up top here, and this bottom portion is a dashboard in our case, but this could be your application content, and you could just give a small bit of space for Q, and when you want to ask questions, you would just click into it and sort of ask the question or pick from one of the suggested questions, and then Q expands and gives you a multi-visual response now. So this is new with Q. Earlier, Q just used to give you a single visual response. This is part of the new capabilities that this generative Q&A version brings you, and that based on your question, it can give you back multi-visual responses, showing you various aspects of your data, and also comes up with generative text, AI generated text, sort of summarizing the key points there. It also gives you suggested questions like, did you mean total profit by industry, total quantity by industry, and so on. Based on your question, it gives you alternate suggestions as well. So that's one mode, and you can also look at the full experience. So if you do not want to just give a little bit of space, but rather your application design is such that when you're clicking on an analytics tab or a Q&A tab, you just want to give that full page to Q, you can do that by going into the full experience. So in here, you can see Q is taking up the full page, and this Q search bar is up top. We have the topic selector coming up here. We have the pinboard option. All of this is available in the search bar view as well. But here, in addition to all that, we surface the suggested questions front and center. And we also give an option to explore what's in the topic. So when you click into it, it lists out the dimensions with some sample values and such. And then you could click into these as well, and it sort of submits it as a question and gives you back more details on that dimension. So in this case, it told me there are 99 unique customers, what are the customer names, and sort of the ID, region, and so on, right? So those are the two modes in which you can embed Q currently. And now let's see how we do this. So I'm switching over to a Lambda function here, which I'm using to just show a plain and simple page with just an embedded Q instance there. So in the backend function, all you really want to call is the generate embed URL for registered user or anonymous user, whichever may be your use case. You pass in the account ID, the user ARN, and all that is same. Only thing that's changing is in the experience configuration. Ignore this one for now. I'll tell you why that's different. This is based on a preview version which I had loaded into Lambda, but the new GA versions are these two, right? So it used to be experience configuration used to be Q search bar earlier. That's still available. So for your legacy or classic Q experience, that's still available. The new one is generative Q&A. So you want to keep this generative Q&A as your experience configuration, and within that, you have to specify what's the initial topic ID. So in here, this is equivalent to generative Q&A in my version of the Q service model, which I have pinned to this Lambda. So you can see here, I have my own version added here. So, but for all purposes, it's same as this generative Q&A. So it generates the embed URL, and then I just plug that in along with account ID and a theme ID into an HTML page. That HTML page is here. And this is a simple page. It just has one container in it and a top container with a child container Q embed div. And we are going to just embed Q into this. So let me bring up an additional page here. And we can have this side by side. So let's style this so it becomes easier. So in here, before I go into that, let's also show you the embedding portion. In the script, what we are doing is once we are getting the embedding context created, this is pre-existing. This is not new with generative Q&A embedding. We are already doing this, generating the context, and then we go on to generate, we go on to embed the search bar. So earlier it used to be called, this function used to be called embed Q search bar. Now that's changing. Instead we call it embed generative Q&A, and we pass it frame options and content options. There is not really anything changing in the frame options that you're passing. You're telling what the embed URL is, which container you want to embed it to, what's the width and height you want it to take up, and whether you want to show a placeholder, a loading placeholder when you're initially loading the page, right? So this, nothing changed here. What's changing is in the content options. So it's all new options here. Let me actually comment out all of this. So right now, everything's commented. I've just have the on message function there, but deploy that. And then let's try refreshing this page. So you can see that it's giving me the full page experience by default. When I'm not specifying anything in the content options, that's the default experience which gets embedded, the full page experience, that is. So now let's try changing these and we'll play around with this, right? So if I were to uncomment this and take out and include this panel option section, therein I have to specify whether the panel type is full or search bar. The panel options itself was optional. The entire thing was optional and it gave me the full experience. But once I include panel options, and then I have to specify the panel type. If I do not, it will give me an error. So I could do a full, or I could do panel type is search bar, right? So let's deploy this with search bar and see what that looks like. No other changes, right? So everything else remaining the same. You can see it takes up a small space up top. It shows me the topic name, it shows me the selector, it gives me the pinboard option and the question bar, right? So if I click into this and ask a question, then the experience is very much similar to the Q search bar that you are used to. Now, let's flip back here. We will change this back to the full mode and let's explore other options there. And we'll keep flipping back and forth a little bit as we play around with the different options, customization options here. So again, you can see, as in the search bar, we do have this topic selector option. We can choose to ask questions against multiple topics from here if we have allowed that. And all that is allowed by default. The pinboard is visible, and you have the option to go into suggested questions, explore the data, all that. So the first thing in here that we can look at is the title. So you can see here, this is what we mean by the title. It says, ask a question about SaaS sales. That's the default title that Q provides. Ask a question about your topic name. SaaS sales is the topic name in this case. We can change that if we specify this title attribute in here within the panel options. I'm just trying to set that to my custom QND. Deploy this change. Now let's refresh. So you can see that the title got changed. Now it says my custom QND. So likewise, if let's say you do not want to show this Q icon in here, you could use the search Q icon option. By default, it's set to true, so it shows. However, if you say show Q icon is false, then you can hide this icon. So you can see here that the icon is no longer shown. So those customization options are available for you. And let's put this back in there. There are these two other options that I have mentioned here, which is focusedHeight and expandedHeight. These ones are not applicable for the full panel type. These work with the search bar mode, and we'll see what that means. So let's change this. I don't need to change that. I had a commented one here, so let's use that. So let's switch back to search bar mode. And then we will customize these focusedHeight and expandedHeight options. So in here, when you click on this search bar, there's drop down that opens up with showing your recent questions and verified questions. This is what you can customize using the focusedHeight option here. And when you do actually ask a question, by default, Q expands to about 533 pixels. That's the default size of the answer pane. And this as well can be customized. So I could try changing this to be, let's say, focused height is 250 and expanded height is, maybe I want to go bigger, let's say 700 pixels. And deploy that. Let's refresh. So you can see here that the focused height is reduced a little bit, or actually went up a little bit. It went from 202 to 250. And then when I'm asking a question, it's expanding to take up more space. Instead of that 500 pixels, it's going on to 700 pixels. Let's go on to see what the other options are here. So for now, we will flick back to panel type full, and then let's comment these ones out, and let's explore what these other options are. So in here, showTopicName is set to false. I mean, that's the default value is true, and I'm going to set it to false. In the default mode, it's allowing to show the topic name, and it shows up in 3 places really. So if I'm looking at it in full mode, it shows up here, SaaS sales. It shows up as part of the title, and also it shows up in this section, what's in SaaS sales. Right? So I could say, instead of show topic name true being the default, I could say show topic name false. Deploy that, and let's see what difference that makes. And the deployments are going a little slow. Let's try that again. So you can see the topic name got hidden here. It says change topics. In this place where there was the topic name, it just says ask a question about your data. And this button says what's in data instead of what's in SaaS sales, right? So it hides it in all 3 places. If you were in the search bar mode, it's really just going to change in one place, because there we are not having this what's in data, and we are not having the title, right? So it impacts only one place if I'm doing this in the search bar mode. Now, likewise, I could say the pinboard, the entry point to the pinboard is here. I could hide that. And let's say showPinboard is false. Refresh this. So you can see that the pinboard option is hidden. And let's look at this in the search bar mode as well. Deploy. And then refresh. So you can see the pinboard option is gone. The topic name doesn't show up here. Instead, it says change topics. We can hide that as well. If we block it here, say allow topic selection. If we don't allow that, set it to false, then even this drop down can be taken out. So you can see that's gone. And let's flip back to the full panel mode now. I didn't comment out the other one, so it overrode my selection. Let me do that again. Okay, so you can see that works here as well. And then there is this option called allow full screen mode, and I'll explain what this does. First, let's enable that. We will disable that. Right now it's here. You can see this maximize option, which sort of lets it take up the full space. And it's not so apparent in this setting because I just have a small margin here. But let's change that around a little bit, so that let's say you're giving queue only a small space within your application. Let's mimic that. So I'm changing my style settings to do that. Let's keep that commented so that we allow the full screen mode. And with that, let's refresh this. So you can see now queue is given a smaller space. Even in that space, it's able to fill up in full mode and make that work. And this full screen option, when I click into it, it's able to take up the full screen space that's available. So this is useful if you have a small div available within your application or within your web page for analytics. You can just stick queue in there, either in full mode or in search bar mode, and then allowing this take over full screen option sort of lets users utilize the full screen space available to them when they are focusing on the analytics part, and then they can come out of it. And this is available in the search bar mode as well, but when you're using it in search bar mode, it shows up when you're in the answer pane. So when you have to first ask a question, and then when you're seeing the answer, at that point you will be able to get into that full screen mode. So let's say show me sales brand, and you can see now that when the answer pane came up, I do have this option to maximize. And this can be taken away by adding this attribute allow full screen and setting it to false. So if I do that, let's ask that same question. So you can see now that maximize or take full screen mode, that icon is no longer there, right? Okay, the next thing we'll see is the placeholder text. So by default, let's go back to this. And let's go back to taking up the full screen here. I'll just change this. So we are having the full page available again. And here, this default text is ask a question about your topic name. And if your topic name, if you chose to, actually this should have hidden it. This is something which I'll have to report back to dev. But of course, we do have this option to override it. So I could say search placeholder text, and I want to set it to what do you want to know instead of ask a question about SaaS sales. Deploy that, and let's refresh. So we can control that experience. So we can fully hide off the topic name that way by setting the search placeholder text along with the other option to hide the topic name. But we'll see if we can get a change in to have that driven by the allow topic, or rather the short topic name, have it change it in the default placeholder text as well. That would be neater. Okay, so one more option we have is with the theme, and this is again not new. We could apply theme on the old queue experience as well. The option is slightly changed. We have to pass it in as a themeOptions structure, and within that we include the theme ARN. That's the way we are packing it into this contentOptions now. So you can note now that everything is sort of a pale gray shade here, and this Ask Q button is sort of darker blue, and this search bar is the same color as the background. So that's going to change with once I apply this theme, and let's refresh. So you see now that the primary search bar color has changed, background has changed to white, the button has become a brighter shade of blue. Like that, you can change all aspects of this Q experience by changing the theme associated with it and passing in that as a custom theme here. So we looked at all the options now. What's next is to look at the messages that this emits. So let me open up the developer panel here, and let's look at this. When Q is in full mode, there is really not much happening because there is no use in that messages getting emitted, because you have given the full space to Q anyway. So there is not much you'll be doing with it. But even in this, if you're, let me take out a couple of these. So, or rather, let's put all of this back to default. Right, showPinboard, allowTopicSelection. Let's set all of that back to the default value. The standard ones get emitted, like the content loaded and all that. And you might see error messages like this, but this is based on a topic experience mismatch. If you're having a mix of old and new Q topics, then you might see this error, but that can be safely ignored. Now in here, so when I click that maximize icon, you can see it emits this event Q entered full screen. And when you click out of it, it says Q panel exited full screen, right? So these are two events which you can use from your application when you're allowing Q to take on the full screen space. So you know from your application that Q is hiding everything now, and that Q has returned to the allocated space when you see Q panel exited full screen. Now let's flip back to the search bar experience. And there is one more new event that's coming up, which is Q search focused. That's when you're clicking into the Q search bar and this suggestion pane opens, then you will see this Q search focused message emitted. And when you click outside of that, it says Q search closed. That used to be emitted before as well, but let's actually ask a question here. And now you see there is this Q search opened that comes up. That again, it was a pre-existing event. And then if you're clicking elsewhere, trying to force Q to close, it also emits that close Q search, because that's the action you're clicking outside of the Q pane, and that can be latched on to do further things within your application. If you wanted to display something different within that space which Q is freeing up, you could do that. Or you could just latch on to the Q search opened, closed, and focused events. So more integration options with those additional message events being emitted. And so we covered those three things. We talked about what the new generative Q&A experience is bringing. We talked about embedding it, and we talked about the capabilities there and the events. What remains is to talk about the transition path. If you're already using the legacy or classic queue experience, how do you get on to this new experience, right? So when you're going into topics, your classic queue experience, you do have an upgrade option. And when you click into that, it'll give you this option to duplicate and convert. It's not an in-place conversion or in-place upgrade, and that's intentional because on the embedding side, there are differences. So if you have already embedded your classic queue into your application and your QuickSight admin goes in and does an in-place upgrade, that would break your embedded experience. That's the reason we do not convert it in place, and rather we let you duplicate and convert. And then it would create a new queue version for you. So in here it's saying classic queue copy 1, and that's in the generative queue topic mode. Now, if you're using, say, only 1 or 2 topics within your embedded application, the switch can be easy enough. You can just convert this, upgrade this from within the console, play around with the new topics, see if it's behaving the way you want it to. The experience should be better than what you were getting in your old queue. In the sense, you of course get multi-visual responses, you get more answers, even vague questions. Say if you're typing in just one word saying customers or sales, it would come back with some relevant results for you. So in those senses, it's much better than the older experience. So play around with that, and once you're satisfied that this is good to be published to your end users, you could go make the changes in your embedding code. So you would make the change to call generative Q&A in your pass that as the experience configuration when you're making the generate embed URL call. And then on the actual embedding side, you would use the embed generative Q&A experience instead of embed Q search bar. That is if you're having just a handful of topics and you are able to control when that cutover happens, and you can have that happen in a single shot, then it's easy, you do it this way. But let's say you are doing this for a bigger organization and you are having 10, 20, 30 topics which are published in your embedded mode, and these are all owned by different people. So the actual authors of these topics are different. You ask them to upgrade those topics, they might not immediately turn around and do that. They might have their own schedules, their own priorities. So in that case, you can have the old and new embedded experience coexist. And that's part of the reason why it's a new function that you're calling embed generative Q&A. And the older one, embed Q search bar, is still available to you in parallel. So you can do a describe topic and get what the topic type is, whether it's the old one or the newer variant. And then based on that, you could generate the corresponding kind of URL and call the corresponding kind of embedding function. You could make that completely dynamic if you want to, or if you have, say, only 10 topics and 2 are new and 8 are of the legacy type, you could even add that as a data attribute within your HTML code. And then based on that, you could give that to kind of embedding experience. And you can see that in action here as well. On our DemoCentral site, we had a larger number of queue experiences here with the legacy mode. And right now we have taken all of that down and have just left 4 in there while the others go through conversion. But we left 4 in here to sort of show how that side-by-side existence can be implemented and what that would look like. So if I'm looking at queue full experience, this is giving me the new generative Q&A variant, versus if I click on the ones marked classic experience, this is the legacy queue that comes up here with that single visual response.